Today we have an obscure, precious little story that we'll find in the Old Testament. So I'll ask you to go ahead and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 9. And if you don't have a Bible today, we have a pew Bible in the pew in front of you, and you can pull that out and take it home with you if you don't have one. That's our gift to you. And we also have a page number here that will correlate with that so that you could follow along. Speaking of following along, I hope that you were able to grab one of our bulletins, and on the back of that we do have some notes that will help you kind of pay attention, and you can scribble some things down like, is he ever going to end, or whatever, and that is there for you. On the front, you will see something that has nothing to do with today. This is next Sunday's sermon series that we're going to be kicking off. And so we just wanted to take a moment and let you know that we have a new sermon series, and we'll be kicking that off next week, and it's dealing with the names of God. You know, my name is Bryan, and that means noble and kingly. My wife and daughters, for some reason, don't see it that way, right? Because it's just a name. But when we're talking about God's name, it speaks to his character. It speaks to his consistency. It speaks to who he is. As a matter of fact, in Proverbs it says that God's name is like a strong tower, and the righteous run to it and are saved. So, why should you care about the name of God? Because there is some struggle that you have, some deficiency that you have, some difficulty that you have, that you need to be reminded of God's character and how he is going to engage with you in your struggle and with your challenge. We're going to talk about Jehovah Jireh. God will provide. We're going to talk about Jehovah Rapha. God heals. And we're going to go through many different names that start with Jehovah, the name of God, and then speak to his character. And the amazing thing is, God's character is fulfilled completely in Jesus Christ. And so we will find how Christ fulfilled the Old Testament name of God. So we hope that you join us in that series. Today, this is a typology. In other words, it's an event that happened in history that was a very important event, but it actually points to a greater event and a greater person. This is about an undeserving individual, not because of works that he has done, but because of works that someone else accomplished on his behalf, was invited to the king's table. He was invited to be in fellowship with the king. We were created in the image of God, and God breathed into man a soul. And whether you realize it or not, man is absolutely obsessed and in need of fellowship with God, to be reconnected with God. But for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, we were unable to attain that connection after sin and after the fall. And so Jesus took on flesh, came to this earth, and lived the life that we could not live. He died the death that we deserve so that we could once again be reconnected with a holy God and sit at the table with him. The main character of this story is Mephibosheth. Now, if you are an expectant couple looking for a Bible name, I think we found it. Mephibosheth is a difficult name to say. I'm going to have to say it about 70 times today. So I will fumble at some point along the way. So I thought about giving him a nickname, and I thought we can call him Meph. But then I thought, well, I could get in trouble somewhere along the way when I'm like, David is going town to town looking for meth, right? So I thought we'll just nix the nickname, and we're going to go with a long syllabic name, Mephibosheth. All right? So here we go. Without further ado, let's turn our attention to this. And what we are going to see is that there are three different acts that we'll look at. There's the invitation, there's the restoration, and then there's the declaration spoken over Mephibosheth. The first thing that we're going to look at, we see right in verse 1. Go ahead and put that up. And David said, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now let me give you some background. David has recently been placed as the king of Israel, and he is following King Saul. King Saul became very jealous of David as an up-and-comer. And so he decided that he wanted to see David dead. And he spent the end of his reign hunting and looking to kill David. And so David ran into the wilderness, and he was just in survival mode. Well, Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in battle. And God had made it known that David was to be the next king. And so David is the new king of Israel. And everything is going amazing. Everything is going literally up and to the right for David right now. It is the Camelot years of Israel. And during that time, God came to David with a covenant, a promise. And he said, "David, I am going to bless you. I'm going to bless your lineage. I'm going to bless the people that you rule. And out of your family line is going to come the Messiah that will save the world. The rescuer, the one after the fall that we have all been waiting for. He is going to come from your line, David." And David was so blessed and so overwhelmed that he worshiped God. And it jogged a little memory in David's mind that he too made a covenant. He made a covenant with Jonathan. And that covenant was found in 1 Samuel 18:3, that if something happened to him or if something happened to Jonathan, they promised one another that they would take care of their siblings, their children, their parents. I'll take care of your family. I'll take care of your people. Now, Jonathan was the son of King Saul. And yet, Jonathan and David were ride or die, best friends. They were strongly bound to one another. They were soulmate friends, so caring, so loving. And so they made this covenant. And so David now is having this being remembered in his mind. I made a promise to Jonathan, and I haven't kept it. And so he comes and he asks, "Listen, does anyone around know? Does Jonathan have any children? Does Jonathan have any family? I want to show kindness to them. I want to be a good person. I want to fulfill my covenant with them." And so he goes to a servant, and he says to his servant, "Hey, is there still anyone left in the house of Saul?" And the servant kind of is like, "Ooh, I knew this question was coming." But he thought for the exact wrong reason. You see, whenever a throne was overthrown and a new regime would come in, it was very, very typical that everyone in the previous regime, especially if it was hostile, would be killed. And so the servant absolutely thought, this is the end of whoever that guy is. And so he was hearing this and realized that the mode of every king was solidification by liquidation. And they would liquefy anyone that was in the line of the throne. Everyone knew it, and everyone expected it. However, that was not on David's heart. That was not David's methodology here. He said, I'm not looking to hurt him. Not at all. I'm looking to show him kindness. And the Hebrew word there is hesed. It's the word that demonstrates God's unconditional, unstoppable, long-suffering, covenant-keeping love. God's steadfast, committed, loving kindness that he shows us. And he's saying, I want to show him a God-like love, a hesed love, a special love, not off of merit, but off of a covenant. And we receive a special love because Christ made a covenant with the Father that he would come and rescue us who were lost and needed to be found. It is an efficacious love. And he said this, for Jonathan's sake. It was because of his love for Jonathan. It wasn't who Mephibosheth was or what Mephibosheth accomplished. It was because of who Jonathan was and what Jonathan meant to David, that David was inviting him to come and receive kindness. You know, it's interesting. Jonathan was raised by a man who most wanted to see David dead. He wanted to have David erased from this world. And yet, he chose to do the right thing and love David, befriend David. Listen, just because you've been raised by it doesn't mean you have to become it. Just because what's been modeled for you in your life may have been brokenness, may have been difficulty, may have been hardship, doesn't mean that you have to continue in that line. God has come to put periods in generational trauma. And so we realize that someone might say, you don't understand, in my family, we get the fangs of addiction in our neck immediately as young people. And it's impossible. No, it's not. Jesus came to give you peace. But you don't understand. Racism has been a part of my family. No. It's got to stop. Anger has always been an issue in our family. We're Irish. Since I can remember, my generations have been unstable, you might say. Here's the beautiful thing about the gospel. You can be part of a new generation. You can be used by God to transform a long story that's been told in your family line. And Jonathan was doing exactly that. Jonathan had the courage to say, hey, I am not going to pass on this hatred. Instead, I'm going to love David and love him well. In verse 2, we realize that there was a servant from the house of Saul. His name was Zibiah, and he was finally found. And he knew that there was a son that Jonathan had. And so verse 3 gives us a little bit of an idea. And the king said, is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show kindness of God to him? And Zibiah said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is a cripple in his feet. So what is happening right here? Well, what's happening is this. David said, is there a son of Jonathan that I can show kindness to? And Zibiah, the servant, says of Saul, he was a servant of Saul, he says, yeah, but that someone is a no one. Yeah, but that someone's broken. Yeah, but that someone isn't the type of person that you would hang with, David. Now, why would he say that? In that day and time, people considered someone who was lame in both feet to be cursed by God. and they were immediately outsiders. Do you realize that a crippled individual was not welcome to worship in the temple? There was no place for them in the temple. They could not go and meet God. They could not be with others who met God at the temple. They were asked to stay outside of the temple because they were cursed. Not loved by God, but cursed by God. They also had exclusion from community. They weren't welcome, invited into people's homes. No one wanted to be with the cursed guy, and so they were ostracized. Not only that, they lost their inheritance. They were unable to fulfill the role and responsibility that they had, and so the inheritance was just moved aside from them. Even if they were the firstborn son who was often given the responsibility of taking the inheritance and doling it out, they would say, yeah, not you. We'll give it to the younger son. You've been skipped. And so what is happening here is the servant's like, yeah, there was a son of David, but he's a cripple. You don't want to mess with it. You need to just kind of leave it where it is. Don't worry about him. He's a nobody. Listen, the cool thing here is David didn't flinch. He wasn't fazed at all. He didn't inquire, well, how broken is he? He didn't say, could he make the trip? Is that a possibility? How difficult a task would it be for me to bring him here? No, he just said this, where is he? I want to show him kindness. Where is he? I need to know him. You know, sometimes the tendency of the church is to assume why someone, metaphorically speaking, is broken. I know why they are the way they are. I know why they have this dysfunction in their life. I know why they're struggling. Instead of turning back the pages to their story and being curious about their life and their brokenness and their difficulty, we just tend to kind of judge and fill in the blanks for them. It's because they were lazy. It's because they had this. It's because they got into this. It's because you have no idea. David didn't do that. David absolutely was thrilled at the opportunity to invite Mephibosheth to the palace, not jumping to judgment. How did Mephibosheth become a cripple? A few chapters earlier, in 2 Samuel 4:4, what happened was Saul, the king, his granddad, Jonathan, his father, the heir to the throne, were in a battle, the battle of Jezreel against the Philistines. And they lost the battle, and both of them lost their lives. So his nanny, or au pair, for lack of a better word, picked him up and decided, we have to get out of here because they will look to destroy you since you have lineage to the throne. And so she picked him up and they began to run away, and she dropped him. And when he fell, it broke his back. And Mephibosheth became lame, dropped by someone who was supposed to take care of him. In one shape, fashion, or form, perhaps you were dropped by someone who was supposed to care for you, not let you down. You know, I was just a kid when my parents got divorced. Just a kid. You know, I was hurt by someone that I called a father or a mother. You know, I went to church. I was supposed to trust this guy. He was big in the church, and yet perhaps someone that you're supposed to trust, someone that you're supposed to be protected by, didn't fulfill the responsibility very well. and it has left a hurt, and it has left a wound. I want you to understand something. Jesus is here to mend brokenness. He says you do not have to be a victim. You do not have to drag that pain and that hurt on throughout your life, because Jesus took the pain on the cross for you. And he offers you a new life and a new perspective and a new hope and a new identity that has nothing to do with that scar in the past. And so we have this great hope that in Christ we can heal, and we don't have to live life continuing as a victim, but we can be a victor through the accomplishments of Christ. So let's just recap the condition here of poor Mephibosheth. Number one, by nature of his birth, he was condemned. You are condemned to be hunted and killed. By nature of his injury, right? He was an outcast and he was helpless. He also felt unbelievable shame. You say, how do you know that? Because do you know what the name Mephibosheth means? It means out of the mouth of shame. Literally, the guy's name is shame. Every time someone said his name, it reinforced, you're not enough. It reinforced, you're broken. It reinforced, you're cursed. I'm just a man of shame. I feel guilt every day of my life, he would say. Mephibosheth thought that he was defined by his condition. So you know what he did? He hid. He desired isolation. He hid in a place called Lo Debar. A place called Lo Debar. It says in verse 5, then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lo Debar. So he found out that he was living in a place called Lo Debar. Now, the interesting thing about that town is literally the word means a place of no pasture and no word. It was way north, past the Golan Heights on the backside of the desert. It was a wasteland without life. He was making sure no one found him. He went to a place that no one would visit, that no one would go to, that no one would desire to take a journey to. I just want to, Mr. Shame, hide from everybody and everything. So where's a good place to do that? Lo Debar. That's going to be my new home. Nothing grows there. No one's going there. You know, sometimes we feel like we live in Lo Debar. And I believe that in a sense, excuse the phrase, we have lowered the bar. I am going to live in a place of desolation. And you might think that it's going to reward you. Listen, Jesus desires to lead you to green pastures. He's a good shepherd. And Psalm tells us that he leads us to green pastures. He leads us to flourishing. He leads us to joy. He leads us to peace. That's the desire of our God. And if you are in a place, in a season of your life, in an area of your life where you are not receiving that, then you need to move towards Him. Because He desires to bring and give that to you. Matter of fact, Jesus says that He offers abundant life. Last I checked, Jesus was the bar. And we could find our yes, our hope, our joy in Him. So don't settle for that dry place. Don't settle for the lie of the evil one that says you'll never really connect with God. You'll never get out of your struggle. You'll never lose that shame. And here's the thing, we often can't get ourselves out of Lo-Debar. Like Mephibosheth, we need someone to help us, to bring us out. That's the beautiful thing about a church community, gang. David went in verse 5 and carried Mephibosheth to Jerusalem, carried him to the table. You see, forgiveness is found at the foot of the cross. And you can do that on your own. You can cry out to the Lord and ask Him to be the forgiver of your sins and the Lord of your life. But often, to find healing, it takes some other people in your life to walk along with you, to be that encouragement, to move you forward. You find that healing in the arms of community. And that's what Mephibosheth was starting to realize. Friends, could it be that there's a Mephibosheth in your life that you need to reach out to? That you need to show the hesed of God to, the kindness of God? You've thought about them now and then, but you just haven't made that step forward to go and to let them know that they're seen and that they're loved and encourage them. An unlikely invitation to an unlikely individual. Secondly, there's the restoration, and we see this in verses 6 and 7, where he says, "And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, 'Mephibosheth.' And he answered, 'Behold, I am your servant.' And David said to him, 'Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul, your father, and you shall eat at my table always.'" So he walks in there and he thinks he's a dead man. Mephibosheth thinks, I'm showing up at the palace just so they can kill me. This is an execution going to happen. And so he walks in and he does what any of us would do. He begs for his life. He runs in and he falls down at the feet of David. And he says, I'm your servant. Don't hurt me. I'm here. I'll do whatever you want. Just let me stay alive. I know how this goes. And David looks at him and he says, "Do not fear. Get up. I'm here to show you kindness. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to love you." You see, Mephibosheth fell down for two reasons. The first time he kneeled down in verse 6 was because of mercy. Show mercy. Give me mercy. I need mercy. And he realized that he had to have mercy or he was a goner. And David's like, I'm going to give you mercy. But the second time he fell is because David also was going to offer him grace. Not only am I going to give you mercy, but I'm going to lift you up to the level of Jonathan. And I'm going to give you all of his land and all of his servants and all of his money. I've reserved it for you. I'm reinstating everything. What grace. I didn't deserve this. I didn't earn your friendship. Jonathan did, but I have received it on his behalf. Mephibosheth by nature, by birth, because he was from the house of Saul, reminder, he was condemned. You realize that we are Mephibosheth in this story. In this typology, Mephibosheth is you and I am him. We were condemned because we were under Adam. The Bible says that Adam sinned, and after Adam's sin has been passed down to every person. Not one of us has dodged it. And we have an infinitely holy God that is only able to stay infinitely holy and good and just if he punishes sin. And so we have been separated from him. We needed a mediator because we were condemned. Romans 5 puts it this way: "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, so death spread to all men because all have sinned." We also, like Mephibosheth, are crippled. We've been crippled by sin, by the fall, by the brokenness. You feel it, don't you? You feel the pain of the fall, the relational hurts, the loss of loved ones, the difficulties of this life. We are crippled, and yet, through Christ, we have been resurrected, redeemed, changed to new life. And we, like Mephibosheth, are living in a place of death, lo debar. Ephesians 2, this is God's assessment of us. And you might say, but this isn't my assessment of myself, and that's fine. Here's the rub, you're not God. So this is God's assessment of us. And hear this. Ephesians 2 tells us that we are, without Christ, children of wrath. In other words, we're sinners. Not only that, our father is the devil. We are sons and daughters of disobedience, and we are without hope in this world, and we are most emphatically and most worrisome without God. We do not have a connection to God. It's called spiritual death, and it means that we would be forever separated from God, not able to dwell with God. The good news of Ephesians 2 is that there's a but. That conjunction's beautiful, and it talks about God's mercy and God's grace. And so he says this, but God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great hesed, because of his great love, his unconditional love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses and sin, his love made us alive with Christ and has raised us to sit with him in heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages we might show off the immeasurable riches of grace and his kindness towards us. In this text, 2 times, it made sure in verse 1 and in verse 7, we knew that the reason for the kindness towards Mephibosheth was because of Jonathan. And we are all Mephibosheth. And Jesus Christ is a better Jonathan. And that's the moral of the story. That's what the story is telling us. That Jesus Christ, God's Son, came to earth and took our sin. He who knew no sin became sin. Died on the cross, paying the penalty that you and I deserve. And rose again victorious, giving us back a relationship with a holy God. And a holy God looks at Bryan Sanders and he does not see a sinner. He sees the righteousness of his Son. Why? Because I just accepted the invitation. I accepted the invitation to receive Christ as the forgiver of my sins and the Lord of my life. I decided lo debar was not the world for me. I chose eternity with God, to be with God forever. And that is what this story is telling us. God has forgiven us for the sake of his Son. Ephesians 4:32. Just as in Christ, it says, God has forgiven you. We have an advocate. We have a friend. His name is Jesus. And he offers you the opportunity to sit at the table and be reconnected with King God. Not only are we forgiven, but we are also given grace. Mephibosheth falls a second time, I said, because of grace. Grace is receiving what we don't deserve. It is unmerited favor. And we talked about how Mephibosheth, he received what Jonathan had earned. And so we thank the Lord for these promises. You know, hearing David's kindness, he cried out and he said, How am I given adoption into the family of the king? How am I given riches? I do not deserve it. And he said this, I am but a dead dog. Now, I know today we have a different opinion of what a dog is than they did in that era. They did not have dogs as pets. Dogs were wild, issues, problems, struggles, difficulties. They would sneak in and steal things. They would bite children. They were nothing but a nuisance. Today, some of you love your dog more than your kids. But that was not the way that it was then. And so, when someone walked by and saw a dead dog, it was like, well, that's a good day. It's another nuisance off of this earth. And he's saying, this is how I see myself, Mr. Shame. David, why would you do this for me? I am just a dead dog. I don't deserve this love. I'm just a nuisance in your life that you didn't need. Why did you drag me down here? I don't deserve your love. That's the point, gang. It's grace. No one here deserves the love of God. But God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but receive everlasting life in fellowship with him at the table. So, 1 John 3:1, John was amazed by this truth, this beautiful grace. And he said this, behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the children of God. We don't use the word behold very often anymore. Like many of us aren't walking around going, behold! Right? Behold is a worship word. Behold is like, can you believe it? Oh my word! This is amazing! Behold what manner of love that God has given to us. Now listen, you do not use worship terms when you've earned something. No one at the end of the week gets a paycheck from their boss and says, behold what manner of love, boss! You've given me my paycheck. You say, I've earned this paycheck. I worked hard for this paycheck. I deserve, by the way, this paycheck. Behold is reserved when it's undeserved. And we have received great love from God. We've been adopted into the family of God. And we've been invited to eternally fellowship with God. This is beautiful and powerful. We were dead dogs. I get that. I know that. But we have been invited to the King's table. It's interesting that it ends really weird. The very end of the story says, now he was lame in both feet. Instead of, and he lived happily ever after. It says, and he was lame in both feet. Why would it say, and he was lamed in both feet? Here's why. Because it wants to make sure that we understand that this is a table of grace. That what happened when David sat down at the table is that the first one that came in was Tamar, and she was a beautiful woman, refined in every way, and she came walking in and she sat down at the table of the king, and she was supposed to be there, and she looked like she was supposed to be there. And after her, there was Absalom, and there wasn't a handsomer guy in all the kingdom than Absalom. His long flowing hair, he walked in like the stud he was, and he had a seat at the table, and he belonged there. Then there was a few of David's mighty men that protected him, and they were brave and awesome and strong. And then there was Solomon, and he came in with like an abacus because he was so smart. And he sat down at the table, and everyone there looked like they belonged. But then you heard the clop, 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 clop of Mephibosheth. And there at the table was a seat for Mephibosheth. And the mighty men jumped up, and they reached down, and they picked him up, and they set him at the table, and they said, you belong here. This is a table of grace. you have been invited by God to the table. Have you received the invitation? Have you reached out and said, yes, God, behold what manner of love the Father has given unto me. I will come and sit at your table. I'd like to show you a story. Her name is Carly. Take a look on the screen.
My name is Carly. It took a little bit of time, but I finally accepted God's invitation to the table. Growing up with my mom, I hate to say it, mom's supposed to love your kid and, be there, but she wasn't. She was mentally and emotionally abusive, occasionally physical. You shouldn't be told, I hate you, as a kid, and especially from your mom and the manipulation that comes with that. My dad, he wasn't in the picture. He was very here and then not. So during that time, I was always looking for a father figure. I was raped twice. God definitely kept me sane and alive through all of that. As, I got older, I started drinking a lot. And this, still probably about the same time, 18 to 21. It put me in a really dark state. I got very depressed. I attempted suicide twice. Apparently, obviously, I didn't do what I went out to do those times, and God definitely had a purpose there. He told me, you're not done yet. But just turning in prayer, that He was my strength. I really would not be sitting here if it wasn't for Him. And there'd be days I just open up my Bible because I'd have nothing, nothing other than just sobbing and, asking God why and what's going on, why is it me? So I'd open it up and, I'd read a passage and it would just pull me to read further and more. And I know I'd sit back and reflect on that time then. And I think that gave me the confidence and the knowledge needed at that time to keep pushing forward. Within the past 3 years, it's definitely been life-changing. And fully accepting Him and, wanting a stronger and better relationship and to be more Christ-like and God-like and, taking those turns and going back to the lighted path it's great. And I'm glad He never gave up. The church got involved so much with my kids when we moved out to Shiremanstown and, started to come to Mechanicsburg. And I think that those steps were definitely needed to help open me up to the healing process. And understanding, other people do have stories. It's not just me. I find myself definitely pulled. It's once you start learning, you want more. And you just can't fully satiate that hunger and that thirst for the knowledge of God and a better relationship with Him and, just getting closer. It's amazing. I find myself in prayer, even mentally, throughout the day, just, thank you for this, thank you for that, or hey, can we have a good day today? That we had the fire drill, can today please get better? Just small little things, and even that, I think, helps the relationship grow, because as a kid, I was just sitting there and crying and being why me, God, help me, give me someone to love me. But the whole time it was Him.
How do I receive God's welcome to the table? the same way Mephibosheth did. We bow to God's mercy, recognizing that we have received something that we didn't earn and that we didn't deserve. It's not a works list anyone should boast, but it's because of Jesus that we have the invitation to the table. And so it's a recognition of I am a sinner and I need God. And then we fall because of God's grace, because it's been freely offered to us. God's love is the greatest love of all because we all need it. And it's the greatest love of all because it's available to everyone. You know, I remember a phrase that a pastor made very, very popular, and it's this: don't let the enemy at your table. And perhaps his name was Louis Giglio, something like that. And perhaps sometimes you still feel like that dead dog. I professed Christ, and I would call myself a Christian, but man, I still feel like that dead dog sometimes. And the name of Satan is the great accuser. And so he loves to come to the table of your fellowship with God. And he kind of just shows up. Hey, how's it going? Man, good to see you guys. Yeah, what's up? I'm going to have a grape. Looks good. Yeah, hey, Carly, that was really moving. I really appreciate you opening up and sharing that video. But do you really think these people are going to accept you here? I mean, I saw the way that lady looked at you. You probably saw it too. Maybe you don't belong here. And you know what, you two, you're the married people, right? You have all the marriage classes and kind of encourage everybody with how they should kind of love each other like Christ loves the church. And it's amazing what you do here. I saw all the time that you work here. I'm pretty impressed. It's just a good thing everyone here doesn't know you had a fight on the way to church this morning. That was last week? I know it. You know, you guys are kind of hypocrites, if I'm honest. You know you probably don't belong here, right? Like this isn't for you. And, oh, hi, you two. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey, you know, I know that you've recently kind of cemented your faith and really have made strides with the Lord. And I see you serving all over the place. But should you be? Like, do you really know all your Bible like you want to? Like, you probably didn't even know who Mephibosheth was before today, did you?
No.
So what are you doing serving here among us? You know, you're not ready for this. You're not prepared to be here. You need to work on some stuff. Friends, that's how the devil shows up at your table. Has he been there with you? Telling you don't belong to be here. Listen, communion is a reminder to all of us that we don't deserve to be at the table, but we're welcome to the table. And so we're going to transition to the communion table.